Welcome back to the program. Thousands of migrants from Africa are still making the treacherous journey across the Mediterranean to seek greener pastures in Europe. This week alone, the Italian Coast Guard said it has rescued more than 6,000 people in as many as 40 small boats at sea and is rescuing some more still. Libya, a country that has been in crisis since the uprising that toppled Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, has had one of the highest number of migrants leaving because of its migrant routes. On Tuesday, authorities said they captured 174 migrants in a desert region some 70 kilometers south of the city of Misrata as they tried to make their way to the coast to board boats to bring them to Europe.
Libyan security forces have captured 174 migrants in a desert region some 70 kilometers south of the city of Misrata late on Tuesday as they tried to make their way to the coast and onto boats to Europe's shores. All 174 migrants held African nationalities and came from the continent's far western and far eastern coast, including from Guinea-Bissau and Somalia. Military Task Force official Ahmed Al-Khan said it is surprising that so many migrants from countries that do not share Libya's borders have arrived in the country. He asks, where are the border police of Sudan and Chad and Nigeria and Algeria? End of quote. The detentions came just hours after some 3,000 migrants were saved in the Strait of Sicily in 30 straight rescue missions on Tuesday, the Italian Coast Guard said, bringing the total to almost 10,000 in 2 days and marking a sharp acceleration in refugee arrivals in Italy. Data from the International Organization for Migrant released on Friday said around 105,000 migrants had reached Italy by boat in 2016, many of them setting sail from Libya. An estimated 2,726 men, women and children have died over the same period trying to make the journey. Libyan Coast Guard or naval vessels sometimes stop boats before they reach international waters and return migrants to Libya. The European Union is preparing to train Libyan Coast Guards in an attempt to help stem the flow of crossings. The new UN-backed unity government in Tripoli faces a complex challenge asserting its authority, while efforts to counter people trafficking have been thrown into disarray by the conflict that followed Libya's 2011 uprising. After the German weekly Der Spiegel in 2015 depicted Merkel as Mother Teresa, and the Chancellor impressed the media with her unusually warm welcome and catchphrase, "We can manage." Refugees still rely heavily on volunteers.
The UN Security Council is planning a visit to South Sudan on fact-finding concerning the recent crisis sparked by a riot between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and former Vice President Riek Machar. This month, the Security Council approved a 4,000-strong protection force for the capital, Juba, as part of a UN peacekeeping mission that had its mandate extended in July. Well, more people have been displaced by fighting, despite thousands more living in refugee camps following previous violence. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, visited those taken camp in northern Uganda.
The UN refugee chief, Filippo Grandi, asked South Sudan leaders to pay close attention to the plight of their people.
Peace has to come to South Sudan. The leaders of that young country have to behave responsibly and not continue to ignore the plight of their own people.
Taban Arikangelo barely escapes the latest violence in Juba, South Sudan's capital.
I was actually chased and shot almost to, but I sneaked. I escaped actually narrowly, and that made me actually to decide actually to run away from that, to save my life actually from from the trouble that had actually taken place from our place.
Violence has continued in South Sudan despite the signing of a peace deal that ended a civil war which largely pitted President Salva Kiir's Dinka ethnic group against rebel leader and former Vice President Riek Machar's Nuer community in August 2015. Uganda hosts more than 600,000 refugees. About half of them are from South Sudan. Grandi paid tribute to Ugandan authorities for providing refugees with plots of land, allowing them to build homes, grow food, and earn an income. Despite issues with overcrowding in camps and scarce resources, Uganda keeps its borders open for new refugees.
Nowhere in the world I have seen, and I've been in many refugee situations, nowhere in the world have I seen people settled with land and with the beginning of shelter in less than 2 months.
Aid agencies say they expect thousands more South Sudanese refugees to cross into Uganda as the political situation in the country remains fragile and sporadic violence raises fears of a return to civil war.
Parts of the world are expecting the occurrence of solar eclipse in the early hours of tomorrow, September the 1st. The eclipse, which is expected to be annular in form, will be seen in parts of Africa and across the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. A 1999 research has shown that climate variables get altered with the occurrence of solar eclipse. Wind speed slows down by as much as 0.7 meters per second, temperature reduces, and wind direction changes. A research paper by Dr. Suzanne Gray shows that wind direction changes about 17 degrees anti-clockwise. This change in wind direction is said to be responsible for mild cyclone in some parts of the world. Solar eclipse occurs when the moon aligns itself in a straight line between the sun and the earth. The opaque nature of the moon causes it to cast its shadow on the earth within the period at which it revolves around the sun in relative motion to that of the earth. The following images show how the annular eclipse will appear in major cities of Africa, including Lagos, Pretoria, Nairobi, and Banjul. Joining us now from Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, is a professor of applied geophysics from University of Uyo, Professor Idara Akpabio. Idara Akpabio is the immediate past head of Department of Physics, University of Uyo, and a member of the Nigerian Institute of Physics. Professor, a pleasure having you on the program. Please, can you lead us through the process of occurrence of eclipses?
Thank you. Eclipse is a natural occurring process when one or two or three of the celestial bodies come in line, just like you had mentioned. In this case, the sun, the moon, and the earth come in line. That's what we call the rectilinear propagation of light. So when these three bodies come in straight line, we have what we call the total eclipse. Depending on their angle of tilt, we can have a partial eclipse. So essentially we have two types of eclipse, the total eclipse and then the partial eclipse, which happens by reason of the movements of these celestial bodies around each other or around its orbit. That results in an eclipse.
Well, you just mentioned there are two types of eclipses. Now, what's the difference between the total eclipse and the annular?
When there is a total eclipse, if total eclipse occurs now, at that point interval where that total eclipse occurs, we'll have total darkness as if we're in the night. But when it is partial, that means the sun is casting a shadow of the moon on the earth. So what we see there is like blurred images. Whereas when it is total, it's like we are in the middle of the night.
Well, hold on to your thoughts, Dr. Pabio. We'll continue this conversation in a moment. Network Africa continues in a moment. Please stay with us.